Welcome in to the Just Basketball Show for November 1st. I am Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. If you haven't already, please follow us in our podcast app, platform of choice. 5-star reviews only. Hit subscribe on our YouTube channel as well. Tons of great episodes in the back feed, including one where I made a prediction that we're going to talk about immediately going wrong on the last one. It lasted about a day before I was proven wrong. But again, those were unlikely but possible. So I didn't exactly stake my whole reputation on James Harden not going to the Clippers. But we're going to talk about the James Harden trade today. First, got to tell you about our friends at Homage, the ultra-comfortable specialty apparel company with NBA and WNBA licenses that have vintage-inspired designs to pay homage to the greatest stories, traditions, and figures across sports, music, and pop culture. Use our link below to make your purchase and support the Just Basketball Show. All right, here's our show today. James Harden trade. He's now with the Clippers. Sixers got an interesting return back. We'll talk about what they might do, all the ramifications of this trade. We're going to play a game of what matters most. De'Aaron Fox's injury, Cam Thomas looking like the best version of Cam Thomas possible through 3 whole games, and the NBA's new in-season courts. Which one of those actually matters most? And then we're going to finish off by talking about probably what matters more than anything, which is the Memphis Grizzlies are 0-4 to start the year and are in a weird spot. But Brendan, let's start with James Harden, who is now a LA Clipper. Here's the deal. Clippers get James Harden, PJ Tucker, and Filip Petrusev. I think I'm pronouncing that right in the deal. 76ers got a 2028 unprotected Clippers first, a protected 2026 first, a 2029 first-round pick swap, 2 second-round picks, one in 2024, one in 2029. The 76ers also get Robert Covington, Nick Batum, KJ Martin, and Marcus Morris. I believe 3 of those players, Covington, Batum, and Morris, are on expiring contracts. And the Thunder got involved in this as well. They have a 2027 first-round pick swap with the Clippers in exchange for the 2026 Clippers pick they own being rerouted to the 76ers. So Sam Presti gets to wet his beak a little bit, and there's some other protections there, but that's the big structure of the deal. Matching salaries, some role players moving around, but Harden's with the Clippers, and the 76ers get some flexibility and some role players to fill in the meantime. Brendan, what is your reaction to this trade? Where do you want to start with it?
My reaction is that I'm glad it finally happened. I mean, I think that's the bottom line, the first headline of anything that I'm feeling. But from a basketball standpoint, I think the main place my brain went on the Clippers end is that the strengths that they had as a team when they put this group together was size, flexibility, versatility. They don't really have that anymore. They're not really built the same way that they were when this all got put together. And I don't know necessarily if that's better or worse. I kind of feel worse about their roster than I did a few years ago. This Harden trade and getting rid of a lot of the forwards. And they were older players. It's not like they were the same guys that maybe led them to the conference finals in 2021. But I just sort of that was a definable great thing about the Clippers, is that they were going to be able to switch, use their length and size, swarm you, swallow your offense up, and spit it out, and have some isolation offense and shooting and everything to get them over the finish line. What's their strength now? What are the Clippers defined by? What is the thing that you're going to be able to say the Clippers will do this to their playoff opponent or to anybody that they're facing on any given night? I don't know what that is after this trade, and I think to me that, regardless of even Harden and what he can do and what his ceiling or floor might be, that feels like a big problem for them.
Yeah, I'm still very skeptical of the Clippers. I don't think there's any way around that we should still be skeptical of them. I think Harden's going to help them to some degree. They've clearly craved a ball handler. They've clearly craved someone to do some of the things that Harden's good at, and certainly there's defensive infrastructure there, but I think there's still a lot of reason to be skeptical. I mean, Harden has not exactly held up physically in a real way. Like, it's not peak Harden anymore. Like, it's not like you traded for prime Houston Harden, right? Like you're trading for a guy that's had hamstring limitations and is not going to be the like ball dominant guy. Maybe you don't need him to be anymore, but you need him to be connective tissue. I think figuring out the him and Russ thing is going to be fascinating on a lot of different levels because they obviously played together. There was some success in the small ball stuff once Clint Capella was traded there. But if you go back and like remember, I was reading Sirat Sohi's the kind of reaction to this trade at the Ringer before we started recording, Brendan, and I was reminded by reading her piece that Harden and Westbrook had like a falling out on a personal level in that situation. So like, what does that even look like? And is Harden like, how does this all just kind of mesh? I think if anything, the person that probably has that this depends the most on, aside from like Kawhi being healthy enough to make this all kind of work, it's Ty Lue. I mean, Ty Lue has a really interesting personality challenge, I think, on his hands to just manage everything that's going to be going on here in a season that now I think does feel a little bit boom or bust for the Clippers, considering the impending free agencies, considering Harden's probably wants, and we know he wants another big contract. Like, there's a lot on the line here for this Clippers team, and this doesn't, to me, kind of gut reaction, I think this makes them better. It makes them more functional, but am I now putting them in with the Suns or the Nuggets in the West?
How does it make it better?
I'm
I don't think it makes them better. I just said it doesn't make them better, but you're sounding like we agree. We don't agree. I think they're going to be a worse team.
I think they could be more functional in a way that makes, like, I can understand the vision, right? It's like if Harden comes in and he is not asked to be lead dominant scorer Harden, and he distributes a lot, which he did really well in Philly, to his credit, and he feeds the shooters, and he feeds Zubac, and him and Russ figure it out. There's a way that like he just eats some innings, especially in the regular season, and makes them more functional. I think it's a big risk to trade away like all of the wing guys. Like there's a version of this deal that I probably like better for them, where like Norm Powell is going out, and they get to keep one of Covington or Batum or Marcus Morris, and you just have another one of those kinds of bodies still on the roster. But I think I am skeptical that this works, Brendan, but I can understand why you say, okay, we just needed someone to actually kind of be the facilitator. They've been searching for that for however long now. And all you want to say about Harden, and I think any criticism you have of him is fair. It's all there. It's part of his record. He's going to give them something in that capacity that I think they clearly felt like they needed. And that I can understand, even if I'm skeptical that this team has it in it to win a title even after this trip.
So two things. One, they did get PJ Tucker. I guess three things. They did get PJ Tucker. So that is, I think, their version of alleviating some of the loss. I think Marcus Morris was done. Covington, they started.
Yes, we agree on that.
Batum has already told us this is his last year, so kind of sucks for him, but not exactly somebody you're building around or counting on in a major way either. So, okay, maybe it's a wash. I think losing KJ Martin is a pretty big deal because I thought that was a nice acquisition for them and somebody that you could see bridging that gap and becoming part of the next identity of this team. So maybe I'm more talking about him than anything. Maybe Tucker makes up for the losses of the other older guys. As for what the Clippers might need what they think they need, which is what you seem to be buying, that they're right about their own identity. Did they not get that in Russell Westbrook?
I don't think Russ is the flavor that they are looking for.
And James Harden, who literally got his coach fired because he wouldn't pass the damn ball last year, is like, you're making it sound like like we've never watched James Harden play basketball and he's just this theory. They traded for a theory who's 6'4" and won an MVP award. No, they traded for James Harden. He's not going to facilitate the basketball for the star players. That is not going to be what his role is. They did not trade for Minnesota Timberwolves Ricky Rubio or something. This is James Harden. He's not going to do that. Just like Russ didn't really do that. I don't think that this guy, who we know a lot about, is plugging the hole that, even if you agree they think that they're right about needing to plug that hole, which I'm not even fully sure is true. I think the ball in the best players' hands on that Clippers team is where they're at their best. Kawhi ISOing, PG coming off screens, and okay, maybe somebody needs to set him up on those screens, turning defense into offense. All that type of stuff is when they're at their best. I've never really bought that they needed one, but even if you do, I don't think Harden is even that player, let alone a good version of that player.
So I think so. Like I agree with you. Like I think we're like 95% on the same page. I think what I'm kind of envisioning for Harden is some of just what we've seen in Philly, where it's like, yes, is he going to need to have moments, and will he have moments where he is doing Harden stuff and taking step backs and ISOing and being James? Yes. But is there going to be times where he does spray it around a little bit and lean into that role that we've seen him do a little bit in Philly and a little bit in Brooklyn, the way we never did in Houston once he changed situation? I think that's the calculus. I tend to think that if I was the Clippers, I might have preferred Malcolm Brogdon, just in the sense of like give me like the more traditional, just like point guard kind of thing, and just frankly from like a leadership and like dependability standpoint of just like you kind of know what you're getting, as long, you know what I mean, like you can't like there's less volatility.
Probably even
there.
More physically unreliable than Harden, though, to be fair with Brogdon.
Which is a real concern. I don't think they really had the. I don't know. I don't really believe they necessarily had the ammo to get Drew Holiday, which would have probably been an even better fit.
No, I think if they did, they might have him, right?
Just in terms of like, yeah, we know they were interested, but they didn't have the ammo. And this. Look, this is kind of like my ultimate feeling on this for the Clippers. This is imperfect. This whole era has not exactly gone to plan. This feels like one of those trades you're making to try and get something out of this era and try to maximize it in some way based on star power. And that to me, even if I'm really skeptical of it, that this is going to end well, and I would not want to be the Clippers giving James Harden his next contract as he gets older and older, I understand how they get here, even if I'm highly skeptical of this. Like you just don't know. Like even you don't know that Harden and like you could say like, okay, we're gonna have Kawhi, Harden, and Paul George and Russ in the playoffs. So, like the only one who's like I'm physically sure is gonna end up being there at the end of the day is like Russ will probably be physically healthy. The other three, I have no idea. What and is Harden gonna be good right off the bat? Like, are you getting like I just don't. You don't know anything you're getting here. And again, to me this all goes back to like Ty Lue's gonna have to push every button correctly and manage every personality perfectly. Like this is now. I think as much as it like this is the roster he has, it's on Ty Lue, I think, to make it. Like they're basically saying, Ty Lue, can you make all of this work? Is what I really read on this. Ultimately, it's like, Ty, can you figure all of this out for us and lead a very interesting mix of personalities to maximize whatever is here?
Yeah, so the why they did the trade thing was the last point that I had. We can get there and then maybe do the Philly stuff, but I think the last point on the Clippers. Personality-wise, yes. There was problems with Harden and Westbrook from what it sounds like. I don't really think they can play together. Westbrook, at his best, was, with Harden in Houston, played the center position. That is not what he will be playing on this team. And to your point about, spraying it around, maybe you could see somebody like, does Norm Powell have good on-offs with Harden or something? Like, sure. Does, like maybe the centers develop some good pick and roll chemistry with him? Okay. Bones Highland, sure. But
Bones and Harden together, by the way, is a hilarious like backcourt to consider.
But also, it's a hypothetical question that I'll answer right away, but what does Harden do when the actual best players on this team have the ball? The answer is absolutely nothing. The answer is standing 5 feet behind the wing, spacing the floor with his hands on his knees.
Mm-hmm. He's not going to play defense.
So I think that the defensive case is actually one that might be easier to make because he has switched and he seems to be the most engaged there. It's a little bit maybe better of a fit than other places might be. I actually worry about somebody like Terrence Mann defensively now in this structure because I think he's somebody that maybe doesn't always switch. But anyway, offensively, he's not a good fit with the best players in sort of a pecking order type of way because when he does not have the ball, He doesn't really space. He doesn't really take spot-up threes. He doesn't really, obviously, cut or do any of those sorts of things. He doesn't really want to play fast, which I think the Clippers can do at times. So I don't know what this is going to look like at all. I don't feel like there's a great way to slice it that makes sense. How they made the trade, why they made the trade, I think maybe is the most intriguing thing to me from a Clippers standpoint is they, according to Shams Charania, this deal got done because the owners had a phone call. Mm-hmm. You might not have to look any further than that for why the Clippers got this thing done at the end of the day. They didn't have to give up Terrence Mann, which nobody seemed to want to do there, and the owner got desperate. Do the star players, how badly did they even want Harden? I don't really know if we know that. Ty Lue, okay, yeah, I guess he has a big job on his hands, but he doesn't necessarily want to be there long term because they didn't give him an extension. Nobody was incentivized to do this outside of, I guess, Steve Ballmer, and that's who ended up getting it done.
The Clippers are they are in their own little lane, I think, as far as how they've built this. They're kind of a one-of-one example, and I think there's just a lot of trickery. There's a lot of complications. I don't envy where they've ended up based on how the Kawhi Paul George thing has gone. I think they're just in a really tricky spot in a lot of different fronts, and I that's where I empathize with this ultimately, Brendan. It's just wondering how do you actually even navigate some of this? 'Cause I think it's really hard to navigate this. Let's end on this part and this and them. We both, I think, said in our best case scenario for them in our preview was Western Conference Finals. Is that best case now higher now? Is it lower? Where are you at on that?
Probably
sense?
about the same.
Yeah.
But they mortgaged a decent amount of their future for this, too. I mean, and that's the place to, I think, pivot to the Sixers is, to me, this trade for the Sixers was entirely about the next trade. And I think we kind of knew that, but especially now that it did not end up including Terrence Mann, who you could at least envision being a part of the next 76ers team. I don't know if anybody here is. I think KJ Martin could be interesting for them. I'm sure some of these guys will play. I think Batum, for instance, is kind of a fun fit next to Embiid. They've never really had a big four next to him. I know it's mid-30s Nick Batum, but this was about the picks.
A big four who wants to shoot. Nick Batum will shoot in a way PJ Tucker's just
I think more defensively. They've had guys who can shoot they've played Niang next to Embiid and stuff. I think the defensive kind of extra length, extra size and IQ and stuff like that. They got a little bigger, which I like, and the Clippers got a little smaller, and that's what happens when you trade all your forwards for one player. But I think this is a pretty smart trade for Philadelphia, to be honest. I think it gives them a little more depth this season, and we can just kind of see how far the Embiid Maxey thing takes them, and maybe they make their next trade as soon as February. But either way, whatever that next move is going to be, whether it includes the cap space that they're going to have or a big trade with these picks or both, they did set themselves up better for the future, and I think you alleviate a little bit of the uncertainty around this team now that you at least have a plan.
I think thinking about this as a transition trade makes the most sense, right? This is a situation where, again, 3 of these guys are on expiring contracts. I don't look at next year as a great free agency class necessarily. I mean, you can go through the names. You could look at Siakam. I don't think Siakam is necessarily the perfect third guy that I'm kind of looking for in this situation. Are you trading for Levine? I think there's some questions about just kind of what exactly you're going to do with this. The funniest part of this, you go to the Hoops Hype has their for top free agents, the number 1 is Kawhi and number 4 is Paul George. So it's just are you you just what is the move here? I guess for Philly as far as free agency goes.
Trade wise,
So is it another?
I think saying Levine is short selling what they could do. I mean, we never know in 9 months who's going to be available in the NBA. So I think you're just setting yourself up to pounce
if we know Daryl Morey,
when that arises. I don't think it's like, all right, now let's go get Levine,
Yeah, and I think if we understand Daryl Morey, I think Daryl Morey is someone who is going to be comfortable waiting and navigating some of this and communicating to Embiid that, hey, it's like, hey, look, we understand, James isn't here. I cannot wait to hear what Joel has to say about this, frankly, because I don't expect he's going to hold back very much. That's not really his MO. And then, I think they're in a good position to wait. They have the cap space now. And secondly, they also got role guys. They got 3 role guys that I like that they can just plug in and play. Covington comes back to Philly. KJ Martin's a really nice kind of upside play for them that they could kind of build with going forward a little bit, I think, as a rotation guy. Batum, as you mentioned, is a good fit. And Morris is at least a body. And it's they got things that fit with what this team is right now, with Maxey and Embiid kind of shepherding everything, with Tobias Harris taking on a bigger offensive role. What they did is both kind of, I think, a holdover until something bigger, because we know Daryl's going to be aggressive. That's pretty clear here. And they got role guys that just help them be competitive now. And, they took Milwaukee to the brink opening night. Joel doesn't play the home opener. I still have some questions about what this team ultimately is going to be. But as far as going and getting bodies, they turned Tucker, who was playing for them, and Harden, who wasn't playing for them, into more bodies that at least are going to give them minutes. And that in itself is a win for a team that can't, I don't think they could afford to just take a full step back this year and punt on the year. And that's not what I think what this trade does for them. I think this trade allows them to kind of patch things over and then hopefully be able to pounce again in a couple months when something inevitably does break and someone becomes
all right,
available.
Question to close this out. Who starts for each of these teams now? The Clippers and the Sixers. Go Clippers first.
Harden, Kawhi, Paul George, Zubac, and Mann, I guess would be my
Russ
5.
Is coming off the bench.
Yeah, I don't think you can start Russ and Harden.
That sounds like a pretty big problem with doing this trade. No, I don't think you're wrong, but I'm just saying. I would probably say... what I think they should do is probably, if I'm just operating in a vacuum and being naive, I might say bring Harden off the bench, but that's not tenable.
James Harden's immediately pouting and going back to Houston, Texas.
And you don't do this trade and shift your infrastructure as an organization to acquire a bench player. So, of course, he's not going to come off the bench. So, yeah, you're probably right. Sixers, who starts?
Maxey, Melton, Harris. Let's go Batum, and let's go Embiid. But I could see Covington instead of Batum and Covington's kind of a flip-flop to me. You could convince me of either one, but I think the rest of that stays the same of what it's been, and you just plug one of the new guys in at the 4 where PG Tucker was.
Yeah, I think you're right. I want to just see them put maybe even more size than that out there at times too. Would be one thing, could you play Harris as a 2 at times and have 2 of those forwards out there, or one of them in Kelly Oubre at the same time, and that they now have the flexibility to do that in a way that we've never really seen them have. I guess with Butler and Simmons together. But even then, it was J.J. Redick is kind of a weak link defensively, and neither one of Simmons or Butler is any sort of rim protection help at all, whereas Covington and Batum can kind of do that a little bit, So I like it. I'm more excited to watch this team, I think, after this, even if we don't know exactly what the rotation is going to be.
Which team do you have more confidence in to make a deep playoff run?
Still the Clippers, because they kept Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, who are great. And I think Kawhi might be the best player on either of these two teams. So,
if he's healthy, yeah,
of course. Same with Embiid. Yeah, of course, if they're healthy.
Sure. Yeah. I think Philly with the size thing is, I think, a good way to end this, just because I think that there's some teams in the East I think that can cause a problem for, that they're maybe competing against in the middle. I think this some of the size, I think, negates some of the Knicks' advantages against Philly, and I think the size will be a big issue for Cleveland in that. And if they're competing in that 3-4-5 range, I think this gives me some. I like just kind of how they're going to match up with those two teams now, I think, on paper, if we're looking at the middle of the East below that upper tier. So, Furkan Korkmaz is also not traded, which tough for Furkan. Just no one seems to want that guy.
Wanted the trade, didn't get it. He was like, "Hold on, there's a transaction happening. Can I be involved, please? I've been asking for 3 years," and then they said no.
Can I? Yeah. And everyone's like, "Are you sure you're good, Furkan?" All right. What matters most? Reoccurring game we play here, where we pick 3 topics and we actually talk about what matters most. There's 2 on-court topics today, and then there's one. From the headlines kind of thing that I mostly just have
let's
some feelings
just
about.
Start there. Get your in-season tournament court takes off, because this is not related to what matters most. I'm not going to pick this. It doesn't matter the most out of the basketball things. So go ahead and vent if you would like to.
These are trash. These are trash. These are absolute trash. They look bad. This is overthinking it. The NBA is like, I understand you want to make this a thing. I think a lot of these look, frankly, ridiculous. I think they look like something you would design up in 2K and like slap on the court. I think they are really clearly trying to make this a thing. I just don't think these are actually good, and I just don't understand. Like, I think these are going to look ridiculous in real time. I just think they're trying way too hard with some of this.
So you
stuff.
hate fun?
I don't hate fun. I love the in-season tournament. I think the courts are just like a step too far, Brendan.
Do you like any of them, or is it just the very idea is an affront to your personal basketball fandom?
I don't like it's. I think like there's some parts of it. I just think like they're overdone. I think like I just also don't think like a lot of like the way the NBA looks right now with a lot of the jerseys and a lot of like the aesthetic of a lot of teams' jerseys and a lot of teams' looks. I don't think a lot of this stuff actually looks very good from like a design standpoint. I don't think these courts look that good from a design standpoint. You know, it's just this random trophy that we have no emotional connection to. Is just slapped in the middle of the court.
But that's, I think, the point that I can get aboard it with is I do think from just like getting people's attention standpoint, signifying that this is a thing, that this is something different, that this matters in a different way, that it's not just some game that's being played, and they are clearly aware that they're fighting an uphill battle to like have fans embrace this, have people in the league embrace this, and they are going all out, and maybe there will be some things we look back on that are ridiculous. I can't say I spent like a ton of time analyzing each one, so I'm sure I will turn on a game and just let out a massive sigh at one point for how bad one of them is going to look. I'm readily going to admit that. But I like the inspiration behind it, which is just like, hey, let's make this as much of a thing as we possibly can. And I think that will pay off. I think that over the years, it'll be like, oh, the courts are back. Oh, it starts the second Friday of the regular season. Oh, it is going to have teams that are in my general region, and then it'll be in Vegas. Like, that's how you kind of build the habit. So I don't hate it, but yeah, the actual courts themselves, I'm not gonna disagree with you on. They clearly, somebody at the NBA league office clearly worked for Boise State like 15 years ago, and they just really took off with it.
I think the commercial they did with Michael Imperioli is great. Like Kawhi, just like in that commercial, I like that they had like a mix of different. Like Draymond as a security guard, you snuck Darius Garland in there. Like you had a good mix of teams and like levels of superstar and younger guys, and so that
need
really
a bigger
worked
suit for DeMar or a smaller suit for DeMar DeRozan next time would be one tip. The man's like swimming in his
baggy
his suit.
Yeah, but that's like in that. That's like in now. That's in now.
No,
like big suits are in.
I'm aware, but that
Not
one
for,
it was like it felt like like a teenager borrowing his dad's suit. We know that he has the money, the NBA has the money. Just make him look a little better. He's a cool looking dude. I mean, he has the rose going on. He is a very famous superstar, recognizable person. I just didn't like how they did him in that ad. But the Imperioli thing was cool. I will agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah, and Kawhi honestly just can't. Every time you put Kawhi in a commercial, it's magic. Like the HEB commercials from back in the day are forever some of the funniest like advertisements I've seen them play. Him in the New Balance commercials always geeks me out because I'm just like, imagine Kawhi and Cameron Brink having small talk, just like what is that like? I have
Him
lots
and
of
our
questions.
Favorite Hooper, Jack Harlow, made some magic together on the screen, right? Wasn't he in one of the commercials?
Yeah. Do you think Kawhi was like, hey man, your hand was wrong?
I don't think Kawhi watched the film. If that's what you're asking me, if Kawhi watched White Men Can't Jump on Hulu,
yeah,
the Hulu original film White Men Can't Jump. No, I do not think Kawhi Leonard wasted his time with that. I don't know how many people did. I don't know if it's in the six figures, if I'm being honest, of total people who watched that movie.
I also wonder what movies Kawhi is really into, if I'm being honest.
All right, let's do a real what matters most.
Okay, but
basketball edition.
Okay, here's the
I have an extra one,
topics.
So you do the first two, and I'll add a third. So we have three.
Okay. De'Aaron Fox's ankle injury, which came he hurt it again the other night, comes back in the game, finishes it, they win. But it's going to keep him out at least for looks like a week, but it doesn't seem like it's super, super severe. And then Cam Thomas, someone we both know, Brendan, I'll text you and tell you who's told me this, said he vacillates between looking like Michael Jordan in his prime and a two-way guy who doesn't belong in the league, has had 30 points in every game so far this season. So those are the two. What's the third you have?
Third is something we talked about briefly with Jack on the last episode that I think we discussed off-air afterward, which is the on-off plus-minus numbers for John Collins so far this season. Not net rating, not anything. I think I mentioned this on the show, but we'll talk about it here. Minus 46, so it's gotten even worse since I brought it up on the show. We didn't focus on the Jazz a ton, so there we go. I also will add Brooklyn-wise. The biggest player that they started on Monday night was Dorian Finney-Smith. That in and of itself could be on this list. I don't really... They just are anti-big man in Brooklyn, it seems. But the Cam Thomas thing is definitely... He's every Hooper's dream. All right, which one matters most, though, between these three for you?
If Fox had been out like a month, I would have said that. But it doesn't seem like he's going to be out that long, right?
I don't really know. I don't know if there's been a specific prognosis. It's just like a weeks type of thing is what's getting thrown around. I'm not sure if we have an official thing yet.
Yeah, I saw an Anscape report that maybe I hallucinated reading this. That's very possible. Who knows? But it's a moderate sprain, so it doesn't.
It's indefinite.
That's the way that they
the
phrased
official,
it.
Team announcement. So that we don't really know. Yeah.
And the Mark J. Spears ESPN write-up was, quote, though the Kings sent a statement that Fox's availability to return will be determined at a later date, a source expressed optimism that the 2023 All-Star can return within a week's time.
So probably not.
So that would be like, that is just, so that's just a normal, you miss some time. That's already happening across the league. Like Devin Booker's missed time, Donovan Mitchell's missed time, Darius Garland's missed time.
Actually have another one to add here on this note, which is local to me, which is, have you seen this video of Bradley Beal that went around yesterday?
I have not. Tell me about it.
It is him on a practice court in Phoenix, getting some shots up. Do you know what Bradley Beal's injury is, or should I say? It's back spasms is what he's dealing with. He allegedly, reportedly, re-aggravated this before the last preseason game when the coach told everybody he was going to play full go last preseason game. Suddenly, never mind. Then obviously misses the first three Suns games, and Tuesday, as we're recording this, he's not going to play tonight either. So that's now 5 games in a row. The dude looked like he was have you ever seen when they separate off the courts at a gym or a YMCA for the old folks basketball game? It's kind of how Beal was moving in this video. So maybe that can replace the Fox one, since the Fox thing is alleviated since we originally had the idea. But it sounds like you're not picking it either.
That's my answer.
Then that's yours? All right.
The Beal one would be my answer because like that's actually like getting a team that needs reps together, getting its title stuff figured out is kind of my answer there. The Cam Thomas thing is fun. I don't know how much I believe it. Sometimes guys just like have these little hot streaks, and he's certainly really talented, but I don't know how much I believe that this is like a real thing for him. And look, John Collins, I feel for him, but like it just feels like he's just a guy that is perpetually kind of a square peg trying to be shoved into round holes right now in his career. That's a little bit tricky. And secondly, the Jazz just are not very good. So I'm not exactly sure like what it's Beal. The answer is for me oftentimes going to default to which one of these actually impacts like the title. And the Beal one would more than anything else. My second, if I wasn't going to pick that one, it might be the Collins thing just because like they did give up an actual pick to get him, and he is a guy that I think is a good basketball player. But certainly maybe he feels like a guy, Brendan, that is kind of, as the league is evolving in different ways and whatnot, he's kind of one of these guys that's getting caught in between different ways. Like he's just not a perfect fit for the way a lot of teams want to play right now, unless you're going to get him in a very specific situation. Like I think he might be good in like OKC playing next to Chet, where he could like actually like be in the middle of the floor more. But in some of these situations when he's playing with other centers, it's just not perfect.
Like you just came up with an example. I kind of think there's a number of places, like we talked about it with Sacramento as a possibility where he can kind of make up for Sabonis, who's not necessarily a floor spacer, but is at least a passer. Obviously, somebody like Towns or Jokic, or there's a lot of players like that these days, and he just hasn't found his way there. But yeah, I think it's just not looking great for Collins. That would be mine, just because it's been such a bad start, and it was a pretty big move for them. Obviously, they didn't give up a lot, but it kind of reorganized how their team was going to look in a pretty significant way, and for it to just look so bad right away. He's also shooting 4 of 14 from 3, which was really the thing from him last year. After that thumb injury, he just could not hit a shot, and if that is also going to plague him, then yeah, maybe we just have to think about him a little bit differently overall as a player. Maybe even where we thought he might fit isn't going to work anymore if he is a lesser version of himself too. But that would be mine. We'll see with Beal. I don't want to panic for my own mental health, but that would be significant if he continues to miss time too.
Yeah, look, there is a little bit of just a weird injury thing going on right now. There are teams that have a lot of pressure on them this season. I mean, Brennan, for my mental health as well. Like you look at this in my neck of the woods, like we're getting Cavs. We're recording this on Tuesday. This is before Cavs Knicks, the first of 2. There's a chance Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell don't play in either of those games, and they both have hamstring issues. And if there's an injury that freaks me out, it's a hamstring.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, like are we sure like all of this is just like and Bradley Beal's hurt and Devin Booker's been hurt.
Bam has a hamstring thing too, I think, or a hip. No, he has a hip problem. Yeah. I mean,
Jimmy's already missed a game.
Somewhat
it's
par
just
for
like,
the course in the
injuries
NBA,
are part of the
but
thing.
Also, it does feel maybe earlier than normal, to have it already kind of like the small stuff adding up for teams already this early feels weird. They're obviously a fluke major injury you can't control, but to have like, a soft tissue thing or a bone bruise, or it's like, hold on, you've been playing basketball for a week. How are you doing this already? Speaking of injuries, I think we can pivot to the Memphis Grizzlies.
Oh boy, this is really what matters most, Brendan, because the Memphis Grizzlies they feel a little bit not dead because Ja's out and all that stuff, but they're 0-4. Have you looked at their net rating through 4 games?
Give it to me.
Minus 8.4 per 100 possessions. That's 23rd in the league because there are some really stinky teams right now. Washington, minus 17. Washington might be the worst team in the last 5 years because Jordan Poole does not give a fuck, and that team is just bad.
Can I give you their net rating?
Houston is worse than
Desmond Bane off the court. So
yeah,
I do.
You have it?
No, I got it.
You need me to?
With him on, they're -4. So not great, but that's still better than what you just gave us as their overall. So they're +4 when he's on, basically, compared to their normal. When he's off the court, their overall net rating is -17.
For fuck's sake.
And that's a player who in and of himself is not exactly some sort of elite offensive creator. I mean, we talked a lot in our season preview about how can he take a leap, and we can get into some of that because I do have thoughts there, but this is not like Steph on-off for the Warriors, where it's like, well, yeah, no shit, he's like the most game-changing offensive force the league has seen in years, so yeah, you're going to struggle to replicate that when he's off the court, even though you have Klay Thompson and Draymond Green and Andrew Wiggins and whatever. It's like, no, this is Desmond Bane. He's like a fringe all-star. People were mad that he got a first extension max this summer because they didn't think he was worthy of that. This is not somebody who should be breaking your offense when he steps off the court. And they just look hapless a lot of the time on that side of the floor, even with Bane on, but especially when he's off.
They don't have another trusty offensive creator. I mean, they don't. They have one guy right now who is playing real minutes who can actually initiate offense for them. And even
Smart.
I like Desmond Bane a lot.
I thought you were saying besides Bane. Smart is somewhat of that.
Yeah, but I think we've known for a long time what the limits of Marcus Smart, like, creating offense for you kind of is. Like, we understand the limits of that. That's not going to, like, solve this issue. He is additive if you have... Like, he makes much more sense as your second or third guy if Ja Morant is around. And he's not. This is a team last year but in the last 2 years, net rating +5 last year, +6.2 the year before. Right now they have an expected win. If their net rating held for the entire season, this is the expected wins of 20.8. They've just been absolutely horrendous. And some of this is, I think, somewhat predictable just because Ja is such a big part of the team. He's not around, all of that stuff. But for a team that has guys that we really like, has Jaren Jackson Jr., has Marcus Smart, has Desmond Bane, has even bench guys and young guys you'd expect to take some kind of a step forward. And a coach that I think has good stuff and runs good stuff and I think is pretty well thought of in Taylor Jenkins. It shouldn't feel this underwater this early, even without Ja, is where I kind of fall on this. That raises some real alarm bells for me.
So to give some of the statistical context here, teams are reigning in threes against them so far. 42% opponent three-point percentage on 160 attempts. So maybe you could take a little bit of issue with the number of attempts that they're allowing. But for instance, like against Dallas on Monday, right? In the beginning of the game, Grant Williams got hot. Late in the game, Derrick Jones Jr. got hot. Like, that's going to fry your numbers to an extent early in the season if you have a night where Derrick Jones, bombs threes against you. And yes, it's Luka and everything, but come on, like, that's not going to necessarily continue. At the same time, they are 25th in offense, and there's really no signs of life there at all. So when I've watched them, I think the defense stands up no matter who's out there. And they're playing a lot of young guys. Like, yes, the Ja stuff gets attention. Steven Adams, Brandon Clark, both out. We know that was going to be a problem for them. But I think defensively, even when it's Tillman and it's, Roddy and LaRavia and Derrick Rose and whatever, I think even if it's not just Jaren Jackson, I trust their defense. It's just the offense, to your point about the lack of creators, but also just not really any shooting. I think that's one of the things that happens when Bane is now on the ball so much. And I've liked that Bane is attacking more in transition, just more aggressive overall. There was a moment, I think, at the end of the first quarter where in that Dallas game, he just dribbled it up and launched a transition pull-up three. He's like, we just need something, and it's going to be this. I like that aggressiveness, but now he's not spacing the floor anymore, and it's David Roddy or Marcus Smart or whoever suddenly needing to knock down a wide open three, and they don't do that as well as obviously Desmond Bane when the ball's in Ja Morant's hands. So all of that trickling down, and I would say the last thing offensively that just makes life so hard for them is they don't have anybody who can finish at the freaking basket. Xavier Tillman is like a walking missed layup this year. And that was a problem in the playoffs last year. Anytime he's had a big role, he cannot finish because he's not super athletic and he doesn't seem to have the touch that you need. And so even like an effective pick and roll, something basic with Smart and Tillman with Jackson and Bain spacing, you'd think like, okay, those are all credible NBA players. They could get a decent offensive possession out of that. But the defense just doesn't even have to worry about Tillman at the basket anymore. They know Smart might take a bad shot. And so you start to see the breakdowns and the lack of shooting, the lack of finishing, the lack of creators. It doesn't feel like they have much in the way of an answer offensively. It feels very worst case scenario very quickly. And I don't see a way that they get out of that without just staying afloat until Ja's back or maybe a trade sooner than we expected. I mean, I think we're there already.
I agree. Tillman at 53% at the rim this year.
And he was at like 60 in the
for a
playoffs
center
last year around.
63% in the playoffs, 71% in the regular season last year.
But didn't play a lot.
But
as much.
Yeah, played 21 minutes a game in 52 games. And then in the playoffs, he played over 30 minutes a game. And we saw what happened. Then we're seeing it now in the regular season when he's playing close to the same minutes per game as he did in the playoffs. They also have Aldama and Kennard out with injury. I think getting those guys back at least gives them some juice. I think Kennard is just a shot maker and taker, is someone that at least can give you something. But if you're Brendan, I think if your offense is dependent on like Luke Kennard,
no, but it will help.
But that's dire. If I'm like, well, can Luke Kennard like turn this around? That's dire. And then they also signed Bismack Biyombo, which I like that as a signing. He's a competent like rollman big who will probably finish better than Tillman. But that's also not a real answer for what is kind of going on here. I still think a Robert Williams trade makes sense for them. I don't really know if there's it's too early for there to be a wing trade or something like that to me, just based on I don't know why anyone, unless you're overpaying, is going to give up someone like that right now that could really feel like the biggest hole on this roster. But I would, if I'm them, Brendan, I think I'm a little nervous about being able to tread water till Ja gets back at this point. I mean, you have 21 more games to go right now. Are you going to be
even being 500 would
like,
be a miracle? It feels like.
And I would not be optimistic they get there. And I think where that puts you as a franchise for this year, there's not like an easy way for that to get better. There's not a way this doesn't feel like a season that's going to end in a great place, barring something just miraculous over the next couple of weeks, where they like maybe are like a couple games above 500 somehow.
And even when Ja gets back, what is that, right? He hasn't been on an NBA court since the playoffs last year, but before that was on and off and was fine in the playoffs. But I don't think anyone would say he looked like the peak version of Ja Morant, even in that Lakers series. So for the games he did play, I don't think you would ideally want to treat that as snap your fingers and things are back to normal if you're Memphis. It kind of made me start to think, Chris, about kind of big picture with this group. And I just went back. I think the best version of this team was 21-22 last season when they were the 2 seed that year, and maybe they were the 1 seed that year, and won 56 games, pushed the Warriors to 6 in that playoff series in the second round, and Grizzlies fans felt like if Ja doesn't get hurt in that series, title could have been ours, right? I think that was their best iteration. That was only 18 months ago, and already since then, Kyle Anderson is gone. Dylan Brooks is gone. Tyus Jones is gone. DeAnthony Melton is gone. And that's 4 veteran difference makers who, as much as you can explain why they left, and we might have all agreed with the moves that they made, you also add Adams and Clark being out, and the ground just sort of came out from underneath this team in terms of young talent in a way that it doesn't feel like they expected to happen. It felt like they just thought sort of that they could keep hitting on the Desmond Bains and the Meltons, who they traded for but broke out with them after barely playing in Phoenix, and even the John Conchars and Santi Aldamas that they kind of pulled out of a hat. None of that has happened for basically since then. They have not hit on one of these picks. I don't know if we want to talk about some of those guys and how they've performed. I have some Roddy thoughts because I know you have believed in him at times, but all that went away, and now they're just left with those guys suddenly needing to play and none of them being ready to contribute. Like, those bench lineups are ugly when they're out there. Nobody seems to have any clue what to do.
Yeah, let's talk about Roddy, because he's kind of the one that I kind of earmarked as maybe could to do something positive for this team this year. Zaire Williams as well has started for them.
Still like him.
Not
Still
been
like
great, still like him, but yeah, but there's, and look, and the other thing to note here is the schedule. Have you looked at their upcoming schedule? Because it's a little bit of everything. I'm going to run through some of their upcoming games. Then we'll talk about Roddy and wrap this up. They have the Jazz on November 1st. They get the Grizzlies, get the Blazers on Friday. Blazers again on Sunday. So like maybe you get a win in there. Then it's Miami, Utah again, the Clippers, and the Lakers both in LA. You get Vic and the Spurs. Then the Celtics, the Rockets, the Suns, the Wolves, and the Jazz again. And then the Mavs, the Suns, the Mavs, the Rockets. Like, you have the Blazer games, but there's not another game in there where you're just like, yeah, man, that's a cakewalk. Like, they could get it done. And even the Blazers, the way that Memphis is playing, they shouldn't just bank on getting 2 games on the road against Portland on a Friday-Sunday series where they're going to see them twice. Like, they might get 1, but if this was a full-strength team, we expect, okay, they go in and take care of it, they get 2, and they could kind of normalize things. I would not have any confidence that they have games up in line here that they're going to be able to just take advantage of in some way. That feels very unlikely to me.
No, I don't trust them against anybody right now. But obviously, being in the West, obviously some of the East teams that you listed off, it's not great. Let's talk about the young guys, but I also was just kind of sitting thinking, could they not have just tried to get somebody in the kind of shot chucker guard category? And maybe they thought Rose would be that. I think everybody turned their nose up at that deal when it came down. I don't know if anyone understood the faith in Derrick Rose to be that for this team. But even trying to separate, like, okay, yeah, you could say, well, Dennis Schroeder, I'm looking at his name. Well, Toronto gave him a bunch of money and a starting role. Probably not going to happen. But Kelly Oubre comes to mind. Lonnie Walker even comes to mind. Terrence Ross is actually still sitting out there. I don't know if that would be the worst thing to try if you're this team. Could you have done something for like a Kobe White, who was a restricted free agent, who I don't think Chicago necessarily cared about? Malik Beasley, not really a creator, but would have been another kind of Kennard type who's just a veteran guy who's not lost on offense. There's just, like Reggie Jackson, maybe he was always destined to go back to Denver, but I think that they're at the point watching them where I'm like, even that would have helped. But the reason that that's the case is these young guys. Tell me what you think David Roddy ideally is in the NBA. He's an incredibly unique player, but if you were to just say, like, the version of him that hits is blank, what even is the answer to that question?
Is it like a PJ Tucker who takes more threes? Like, is that, I mean, he's strong enough. He's got the frame. He's never going to be super big. He's obviously like 6'4", but he's thick. He's built like he's like a football player. That's what he looks like when you watch him and you see his frame. It feels like he is like a 4 who can dabble in some 3, but really tries to rebound well for you and takes corner threes and can attack closeouts and is willing to shoot and then muck it up on the defensive end. I think that's the path. And like, that's a guy that in theory, like, you could play Triple J at the 5 and him as your 4 and it function. But we're not really getting that from him. Like, what PJ Tucker is kind of, I almost sometimes, he's not an all-star by any means, but I think what Tucker is there's like a testament to how that guy plays that I think you can't teach that. You can't teach that guy's willingness just to mix it up and be engaged all the time. That's like a real skill. That kind of physicality, as big as Roddy is and as bruising as he can be sometimes, hasn't always come through. And that to me is probably the biggest concern I would have with Roddy's one, on top of the fact that, like, I don't think he's scaring defenses by any means as a shooter. Like, he's not someone you're freaking out about if he's in the corner spotting up from 3.
It's probably the best comp. I looked at NBADraft.net. They tend to have some pretty good comps. They had him as George Niang. And I'm looking at PG, not as big, not as good of a shooter, obviously, but I think, the Tucker thing makes sense. But when I watch Roddy, I'm like, he does not look as big as Tucker at all. But dimensionally, they're listed as kind of about the same thing. Like, they have similar wingspan, similar height. The weight, actually, Roddy's listed as being heavier than Tucker, which does not feel possible to me personally. But okay, go off team PR staffs.
NBA weights are all fugazi. They're all bullshit.
I just don't. I mean, it's not even just a weight thing. He really does just look smaller. But obviously, the height and wingspan stuff. It's like the combine kind of doesn't lie.
But it's because, but Brendan, I think it's just because Tucker when Tucker plays that way, he feels bigger. It's how Pat Bev is not big, but Pat Bev feels like a big guard because Pat Bev is about that physical basketball life. When you play a certain way, I think it makes you feel like you got like the gamma radiation, like you're the fucking Hulk, and it makes you seem bigger. It's like you're Super Mario and you eat a mushroom, and it makes you bigger and feel bigger. That is not the case with Roddy. He's 22, so it's not that it's just maybe he's younger and all that stuff, but like it doesn't pop off the screen in the way you might hope it would for a guy that is naturally just that built. In his college film, I think gave you some indication that like there's like a bruiser in there.
I think the thing about those guys too, whether it's Tucker or Beverly or any number of other players, is they broke out late in their careers, or at least late in their life compared to, what Roddy's at right now. And I think that to me kind of speaks to a little bit of what's going on here, where even though I might not believe in Roddy like as much as you, or you might not believe in Zaire Williams as much as me, and I've mentioned Jake LaRavia as somebody that I'm intrigued by, and I think he looks a little more physically ready to play this year. They've all had moments. You can kind of squint and maybe think there's something there. None of them are on par or on course to be Desmond Bane, and none of them are on course to even be like a nice find like Brandon Clark was. They just are appearing to be incredibly dependent players who are suddenly having to be much more than that. And that's why I thought, like, could a gunner guy have just rolled the ball out and at least given them some structure? Even if the structure is this guy's going to shoot like 42% and turn it over quite a bit, sometimes that's probably better than what their offense looks like when Bane is not on the floor. Do you have any Jaren thoughts? That might be the only guy we haven't talked about, because when I watch them, I think that when he is able to operate in space one-on-one, whether that's in transition or in a face-up or a seal or just a quick shooting, scoring opportunity, he draws fouls well. That all still is working, even without a setup man like Tyus Jones or Ja around. But I just don't know how old is Jaren? 24. Just turned 24. There's a little still to go, but right now he is not ready to be an offensive engine. And I think we just kind of know that now. I mean, it's been almost a full year of basketball without Ja at this point, and that's just not been what he's been able to do.
I think we just might know what he is, and that's, again, like, he could still add it in some way, but he's not even... Like, I don't think of Bam as necessarily like an offensive engine, but Bam does a bunch of things that are really additive to an offense.
Kind of an engine, I think.
Yeah. But he can also like hurt you in the middle of the floor, and you're kind of scared of him. And Jaren doesn't totally feel that way. It feels kind of like when you get a big scoring out of him, it feels a little bit like oh, okay, that happened. Good, we need to take advantage of that. So I think I'm full step with you on Jaren. The other, I guess the last thing, and I wasn't thinking Jaren. I was thinking about Taylor Jenkins for a second, Brendan, because this is year 5 for him. And
they are worse with Jaren on than off this year, just to add that nugget too. They're worse when he's on the court so far.
Which is
Small
weird.
sample, but I mentioned it with Bane,
weird.
so.
Yeah. Team's just bad.
Taylor Jenkins.
Seems just... Year 5... Is it possible that he just, like, could you see a world where he's, like, a fall guy in all of this, and they just have to, like, I don't know. Like, everything just kind of feels on the table right now to me a little bit, if I'm being honest.
Sure. I mean, I think it is. I think, to me, if you're making the case against Taylor Jenkins, and I want to remind that I did praise the defense, and I think a lot of that is him. So,
yes,
that has stayed. And I do think that will level out. They'll be able to win some probably 93, 91 types of games if they win at all in the near future. Maybe you'll get a Derrick Rose game, whatever. But that is Jenkins to me. The case against him would be off the court, the locker room stuff, and I just think it's kind of hard to pin that on him when we know the extent to which Ja was a problem in and of himself, separate from anything else going on. Ja just had issues. And I don't know if anyone else on this roster necessarily does. So it would sort of be like blaming Ja's issues on Taylor Jenkins. That doesn't feel fair. But that would be the only way I could see it. Otherwise, obviously, like things are stale. You see coaches get fired for that stuff all the time. But I would blame Zach Kleiman personally.
Yeah, but this is the way this works. Is the GM gets a chance to fire a coach. I feel for coaches in this. I feel for coaches because you look around the league at a lot of different situations that are not the coach's fault, where a coach could get fired. Let's say like a Chris Finch in Minnesota, for instance, is someone like if things don't go wrong and they change coaches, he didn't choose to bring in Rudy Gobert. Maybe he had some input. I don't fully know. But like coaches get fired because the front office guys are the ultimate ones and it's a chance for them to save their job and fire the guy below them and extend themselves. But I agree with you. I mean, Zach Kleiman is the one who didn't just like throw all the picks they had in for someone who was more proven, who traded for Justice Winslow in a trade that did not work, who has seemingly missed on a lot of draft picks.
It's crazy how fast.
Yes, he got Bane, but like
flip. I mean, Kleiman was like the jewel of the NBA for a while with the way that he built the core of this team, and they still have that core. I don't think a new coach would change much. I think you kind of are what you are if Ja is your point guard at the end of the day. He's going to have the ball. He doesn't really spot up. He's fine off the ball. It's not like impossible, but that's going to be how you play offense. Your half-court offense is going to be a question mark. Like, I think a lot of the things are personnel, and so I'm going to blame the guy who controls personnel, but you're totally right, of course. I think if things really go badly this year, maybe they make some trades, but they would probably fire Taylor Jenkins. Then Zach gets one more year. And then if he can't do it, then maybe ownership fires him. But I don't know. I don't know what there's not going to be an early season move. Trades like that don't happen. So
no.
They're kind of stuck with this, and then
unless
hope
they
God does fix some things, and they're not too far out of it by then.
Yeah, and what I think if there's a lesson about this broader, Brendan, to spin this out a little bit, and maybe this is an episode we can do later when we see where this ends up. I think for teams that find success in some way, that particularly I would say like smaller market franchises, Minnesota, Cleveland, Memphis, like go around the league, go to the smaller markets that are never like they have to draft and they're going to have a hard time bringing in the biggest name players. I think Sacramento I would put in this as well. When you get when the window presents itself, I think you owe it to yourself, your organization, your fan base to try to push it through as best as possible and as aggressively as possible. Because 5 years out is not guaranteed. A year out is not really guaranteed. 2 years out is not guaranteed. I think you owe it to yourself to, within reason, push things aggressively as possible. And I would wonder if you look back at Memphis, you ask Zach Kleiman in ownership there, do you regret not being a little bit more aggressive in pursuing this? I wonder if they would say yes. I would tend to think they would. And I think if I'm all these other teams that are in not exactly one-to-one comps, but similar situations in terms of needing to maximize whatever is in front of them right now, I think they owe it to themselves to pursue things in a really aggressive way. If I'm Sacramento, yes, I'm really happy with Keegan Murray, and I'm really happy with the internal development, but I'm trying to maximize this as best I can because you can't guarantee that this is going to hold up for as long as you think it might on paper.
This situation, some of these problems would be here this year with Ja.
Yes, 100%. But the Ja situation and him being suspended, and I think rightfully suspended, and all of the other concerns, you read the ESPN story, all that stuff, that has exasperated everything. Because your franchise bedrock was not a bedrock for you, and you probably needed him to be that bedrock for you.
Yeah, it just makes me wonder, did those, miracle records with jaw off that we saw for years and some of that stuff just give them rose-colored glasses? It gave a lot of us that. I think it would have been reasonable, but as I listed off at the beginning, how many of those vets are gone now? Like the guys who gave you those great records with jaw hurt, that isn't here. So it could never have persisted that way. You were going to have to do something. And yeah, you can't plan for Ja missing 25 games, but as we just said, I don't even know if Ja's going to fix this at this point. So this feels like a team that should be on watch to do something pretty dramatic at some point this year. I think we can say that for sure.
Do you want to just say one thing about Dallas from Monday? The Luka had a 3 with like 30 seconds to go over Desmond Bane that I think is just like the most heat-checky shot I've ever seen Luka Doncic take. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm talking about, Brendan?
I saw
you know what shot
a
I'm talking
montage
about?
of all of the threes, so I did see it.
He one dribble between his step back like 3 feet behind the line, and Desmond, and it's just like, I'm feeling it. I know this is.
It feels like he's playing darts when he does that. Like the ball just floats through the air and it just hits exactly precise. Like the passes also, it just feels like the precision and stuff is on another level. I'll add a Luka thing while we're here. Go.
He should the dart celly that some James Madison does it, but like Luka could do that, and he could actually. I don't know if he plays darts like that. I don't know if that's like a thing for him, but like he could make that like a cool NBA celebration. I think if he was just like doing the darts thing,
better than the bow and arrow. That's played out.
Or he should do he should just like, because he's from the Real Madrid family, he should just every time he hits a 3 like that, just do the Jude Bellingham and stand there and just like look up in the sky and then knock it back.
Yeah, I was just gonna say
you're
getting Luka punched in the face by a teammate if he's gonna do all of that after one made basket in an NBA game. This point has been made by other people, but the Mavs are playing faster. I like Luka hitting the outlet pass a lot more, and specifically the chemistry that he's developing. He looks for Josh Green on those every time, and it's just like, Josh, go. And and then Josh, because he's so unselfish, Josh Green will then also be looking for the pass, and it's just like those two making like crazy transition plays multiple times a game. I'm like, Luka, you didn't have to be rolling the ball up the court for the past 5 years, brother. You could have been doing this all along, but maybe it was just Josh Green had to get minutes for this all to come together. Either way, I'm liking it. That team looks good so far, I think.
Undefeated so far. Luka maybe coming for Kevin Love's title as best outlet passer in the league.
It's well within his reach. I mean, he's the best other kind of passer, I think, or up there. So why not do it in transition too?
Yeah. All right, we're going to end there. We'll be back next week with more on the Just Basketball Show. Thanks again to our production team on the back end for doing their thing. And check out our full backlog, including a great episode with Jack, a.k.a. Jokic Star, from earlier this week, where we did a bunch of fun things, and I said something that was immediately proven wrong because James Harden plays for the Clippers now. Enjoy the hoops, everyone. We'll talk to y'all early next week.